Before the world saw her as the youngest self-made female billionaire, before the yellow branding, the wall decals, the empowerment slogans, Whitney Wolfe Herd was just a 24-year-old inside a startup that felt like a rocket with no pilot. Tinder was exploding, millions of swipes, millions of matches, millions of eyes, and inside that chaos, she was building the voice of the company. The personality, the marketing spark, even the name that would become a cultural phenomenon. But something else was growing in that same room. A culture that didn't know how to handle its own fire. A tension that pushed her from co-creator to target. And a lawsuit that would turn her life into tech's most public, modern gender war. Most founders rise from obscurity. Whitney had to rise from disaster. This is how someone turned from villain in one story into architect of a billion-dollar empire in another. Whitney Wolfe wasn't a stereotypical tech founder. She wasn't eating ramen, debugging through the night, or pitching to VCs with a half-dead laptop. Her skill wasn't code. Her skill was storytelling. Shaping how people feel about a brand. Which is funny because Tinder wasn't supposed to be a brand at all. It was supposed to be a feature, a side project, a spark. But the spark caught, and suddenly Tinder was the hottest thing in the world. Whitney stepped into the blaze with instinct. She built a campus ambassador program at USC that basically hacked virality before virality became a playbook. She crafted the tone of Tinder, the snappy, playful, slightly irreverent voice. And according to multiple early employees, she helped coin the actual name. But the bigger Tinder became, the smaller Whitney felt inside it. The energy shifted. The jokes got sharper. The boys' club banter didn't land as banter anymore. Friendship twisted into rivalry, which twisted into resentment, which twisted into something uglier. What happens when you help build a house, and then the house decides there's no room for you? In 2014, it boiled over. Accusations of harassment, retaliation, emotional abrasion, and then the lawsuit that detonated across every tech newsroom in America. Screenshots, messages, testimonies, all dragged under a spotlight nobody wants. She was 25 years old, and overnight, she became clickbait. You could feel the internet choosing sides. It's what the internet does best, manufacture tribes. Some called her a liar, others called her a hero. Tech loved the spectacle. Twitter loved the outrage. But beneath the spectacle was a human being whose entire early career had just been set on fire. Most people, after a public humiliation like that, go quiet. Whitney didn't. While her old company kept sprinting into the world's swipe addiction, Whitney hid in plain sight, in Texas, on her parents' couch, carrying a suitcase full of anxiety. She considered quitting tech forever, not pausing, quitting. And then, it clicked. What if the very thing that broke her became the blueprint for something new? She didn't reinvent dating, she reinvented power. In Bumble, women message first. A tiny rule change, like moving gravity 1 centimeter to the left, but it changed the physics of digital romance. Unwanted messages shrink, safety rises, tone shifts. Entire conversations feel different because the starting pistol is now in someone else's hand. Investors laughed. Cute idea, feminist novelty, Tinder for girls. Whitney smiled and built anyway. Whitney didn't build Bumble alone. The moment she left Tinder, her phone buzzed with a message from someone she barely knew. Andrey Andreev, a founder whose name almost never appeared in American tech press, despite running Badoo, a dating empire with hundreds of millions of users across Europe and Latin America. The two had crossed paths years earlier in industry circles, but only lightly. He remembered her creativity. He remembered the spark. And in her public disaster, he saw something he recognized in himself. Someone underestimated by the wrong people. Most investors would have run from the noise around her. Andreev leaned in. He invited her to London. They talked in his glass-walled headquarters overlooking the Thames. Whitney with a wound still open. Andrey with an empire that couldn't quite plant a flag in the US. Badoo dominated abroad, but in America it barely registered. The US market wasn't just another country, it was the global showroom. Whoever won here shaped the narrative for everyone else. Andreev didn't need another dating app. He needed a different dating thesis. And Whitney had one. He offered not just capital, but infrastructure. His engineers, his data science team, his architecture, his distribution expertise. Badoo would function as the technical engine beneath her brand. A silent power plant under a house painted yellow. It was one of the strangest partnerships in tech. A female-founded, feminist-angled US dating app running on the global machine built by a Russian-born, London-based founder who despised publicity. But it worked because each filled the other's blind spot. Whitney brought cultural intelligence, the brand, the philosophy, the emotional inversion the US market was ready for. Andreev brought scale, the engineering muscle and product experience that could turn a vision into a functioning ecosystem overnight. And yet, Badoo never became the headline. Not because it didn't matter, but because Bumble's brand relied on something Andreev didn't have. Trust from American women. He knew it. He didn't fight it. He let Whitney stand in the light while he stayed in the shadows. Bumble became the rare startup forged from two different worlds. Her emotional architecture built on top of his technical empire. She insisted on the yellow color palette because yellow is the color of warmth, optimism, and safety. She didn't want Bumble to feel like a nightclub. She wanted it to feel like a sunlit living room, and the world felt the difference. The numbers climbed. The matches were healthier. The retention was stickier. The brand sentiment, off the charts. Tech pundits said her growth was impossible. Then they said it was improbable. Then they said nothing at all, because the charts were speaking louder. Bumble wasn't a product, it was a cultural correction. There's a tiny moment, never flashy enough for headlines, that defines the whole arc of Whitney Wolfe Herd. In 2017, Tinder tried to copy Bumble. They introduced a women message first mode, but only as an option, a diluted imitation. Bumble replied with a full-page ad in the New York Times. "We swipe left on your attempt to recapture users by copying us." It wasn't rage, it wasn't revenge, it was poetry, with teeth. The student had outgrown the teacher. In 2021, Bumble went public. The image went viral instantly. Whitney standing on the NASDAQ balcony, holding her child on her hip, surrounded by her team, 85% women, all wearing yellow. A visual inversion of the tech stereotype. The misfit founder who was told she didn't belong, now ringing the bell on an empire built on every reason she did belong. Her stake was worth roughly $1.5 billion. She became the youngest self-made female CEO to take a company public. Not from hype, not from jargon, not from chasing unicorn status, from insisting on a simple truth: emotional intelligence is a competitive advantage. Whitney Wolfe Herd didn't create Bumble despite what happened at Tinder. She created Bumble because of it. Most founders build from ambition. Whitney built from injury. She let her wound become a compass, and it changed an industry. People forget this, but the dating app world is one of the few tech infrastructures that genuinely shapes the emotional lives of millions. Swipe-based romance influences marriages, breakups, births, loneliness, and connection. Whitney didn't fix online dating, but she rebalanced it. Bumble's success isn't a story of revenge. Revenge is reactive. This is a story of inversion, of turning pain into architecture, of rebuilding a world you once thought had rejected you. Our next founder couldn't be more different. Whitney Wolfe Herd built a company powered by emotional resonance. Jensen Huang builds machines that simulate the universe. He starts as an immigrant kid washing dishes in a Denny's and ends up steering the global arms race for artificial intelligence. If Whitney redesigned how humans connect, Jensen redesigns the brains that will one day connect everything. Bumble is the story of shifting power in relationships. NVIDIA is the story of shifting power in the world. And together, they show that every revolution, emotional or technological, starts with someone willing to flip the rules. Now I want to hear from you. Which founder, company, or rise and fall story should we cover next? Drop your ideas in the comments, and it might just become the next episode of The Founder Files.